Now let's take a look at the forms. Let's look at irregular verbs. Again, I go through the strong form, even though you don't need it, but it's nice to see how it works. You see, I take the stem of the past, the preteritum, and I add an umlaut to it. That's unusual. You would see the comparison. You have the E, like you had in the Konjunktiv 1, and the usual endings. Nothing special here. Also no irregularities, except that you took the preteritum stem and put an umlaut on it. Yeah? So this is how you build it for everything. So in order to use this form, you would have to learn the preteritum. And why go through the hassle if you don't need that? But it helps you to at least get an idea of what do I have in front of you, what do you have in front of you if you see it in some kind of weird book. Yeah, might be in Harry Potter. I haven't read it in German yet. So don't bother with this. Use the simple version. With this simply a form of Würde. And these are the forms of Würde that you need to know. And you already should know the endings here. And the only thing that's different is the S. And then use the infinitive. It doesn't get simpler. Yeah. There's still more. Let's take a look at regular verbs. That's interesting. So if I had sagen, like we used before, we need the preteritum stem. And that it seems that the preteritum stem is sagte. I just highlight the E so that you see it's a cognitive marker included. And now the problem we have with these is regular verbs cannot really take the umlaut. Sägte, möchte, and kaufte do not exist. Sägte exists, but it means to saw a log. So you can put an umlaut here, and that causes trouble because the preteritum of sagen looks identical. And therefore, everything resembles the preteritum, the form that it comes from, that it's based on, and that means you have to use the Konjunktiv 2, the simple form, ich würde sagen, machen oder kaufen. Yeah, just as an explanation why we never use this with regular verbs. So if you use the simple form, you don't have to think about Konjunktiv 1 or Konjunktiv 2. You don't have to think about is it regular or irregular. You simply use I would say, I would make, I would buy. Yeah. Couple of important forms. We're almost through. It's not much left. And I will also, this one I will skip through quickly. Haben, sein, and werden are the ones we talked about before because we use them to build other tenses and forms. Simply take part from the stem from the preteritum, which basically is this at the E marker and at the ending. Nothing really difficult. And now let's take a look at a couple of forms. And again, don't try to remember them. Just go with the flow. Ich habe geschlafen, says someone directly. And if you report that, sagt, hätte geschlafen. He said he slept. He would have slept, literal translation. And in the past, we have also the bin form, ich bin gelaufen. Sagt, wäre gelaufen. He said he was running. Yeah. Again, the translation doesn't really help. Literal translation would be, he said he would have been running, something like that. Wäre is would have been. Yeah. This is B2, and this is something you can use nicely. Ich werde sterben, I will die. Reported, sagt, würde sterben. He said he would die. Yeah. And see the difference. Ich werde sterben, I will die. And then the second one, I would die, he would die. Now, werden almost never is translatable into to become, which is what your dictionary says if you enter it there. Don't use it like that. Yeah, it's in 1% of the cases, werden means to become. And that is when you become a mother or a father. Ich werde Mutter, ich werde Vater. Maybe a couple of others, but it's really rare. So most of the time, werden is used to create something new. It's an auxiliary. It's a helper. So with sterben, it creates the future form, the infinitive of sterben. I will die. Yeah. But werden doesn't mean will. It's just how the English say that. And the future can also be finished. If you go further into the future, you already have things that are not yet, that haven't happened yet, but they, looking into the future, they will be finished. Ich werde gestorben sein. I will have died. Sagt, würde gestorben sein. And you see, it's pretty simple. You just put the underlined word into the Konjunktiv 2 form, which, again, with a bit of practice, you master easily. And needless to say, you learn these in my courses. And of course, at the time that they matter. Yeah. So Konjunktiv 2 you will learn already in my A1 to B1 course. But the details like these future forms and passive forms, in the past forms and modal verbs, all these things you learn in B2, because that's when they are a little bit more relevant. But as a beginner, this is just an overview so that you know what's coming. And trust me, it's a lot of information right now, but it's really doable. Yeah, it's not complicated. And you will not, of course, take all this in at once. You will be presented with this information step by step. Yeah, of course. Yeah. The 1 and 2 under the future, next to the future, means future 1, future 2. We have a futur 1 and futur 2. Like we have Konjunktiv 1 and Konjunktiv 2. Yeah. And that's what it means. Passive. Passive is something you will also learn in my A1 to B1 course, maybe at the end, because we use it here and there. Ich werde angerufen, I am being called. And you see, werde has another translation. So werde really doesn't mean anything. It's a chameleon. Sagt, würde angerufen. And ich bin angerufen worden. So there's a passive past form. Beautiful, by the way. Beautiful stuff. Each of these points is beautiful. But of course not all at once. So sagt, wäre angerufen worden. All you do is you put the auxiliary verb into the Konjunktiv 2. It doesn't get simpler. So the Konjunktiv doesn't really add much more difficulty to these topics. You need to learn, of course, the past, the future, and the passive at one point. So the Konjunktiv is just something you put on top like the cream, yeah, after you've learned the forms. So don't worry about it if this looks like Chinese at the moment. Two things for those that are already there. Würde stolz sein. You might be tempted to translate that as he would be proud. I haven't put a translation there. So he would be proud. In English, that might make sense. He would be proud of you. But in German, you cannot use würde and sein. Well, you can, but it's not really used. So you rather use the strong form of to be, which is wäre, which you've seen before. Same with haben. You really don't use he would have no money. You would say he wouldn't have no money. Yeah, hätte. He would have no money. So you always use sein and haben in their strong forms. And the same with modal verbs. I just give you one example, which is würde nicht sehen können. You would say könnte nicht sehen. So with modal verbs, haben and sein, you don't use the würde. You've seen that before as well. Here's another example. Würde nicht bezahlen müssen. Müsste nicht bezahlen. Also simpler and shorter and easy to learn. Könnte, müsste is not really a challenge. Yeah? I get to your question later, D. So modal verbs are just these 6 words. They exist in many other languages, and they get really nasty in late B2 because they have a very subjective meaning and they cannot be translated easily. But until then, they're basically very doable. So keep in mind, dürfte is an indicator. This is not reality. It's an assumption. It's something that is not fact. Ich dürfte basically means I should. Ich könnte. I could. These are easy. And here you have ich möchte. And as you can see, as a little note at the bottom derives from mögen. Möchten is not really an infinitive that you find in the dictionary, but I nevertheless write it here because that's the modal verb we use. Mögen we rarely use. You say, ich möchte nichts essen. That's something you learn very likely in one of the first lessons ever. Yeah. And here you have, I would not like to, I would like to. Möchte means I would like. Yeah. I say, ich möchte nicht, I would not like, I wouldn't like. So this is all there is to say about möchte. And we can go deeper in the Q&A later. Ich müsste mal nachsehen. This is something you hear from people. If you ask, is Maria zu Hause? Is Mary at home? They say, oh, I would have to check. Yeah, let me check, you would say in English, but in literal translation in German is, I would have to check. Ich sollte. Sollte is a tricky one. I should actually make a masterclass about sollte. In most cases, let's say 90% of the cases you see sollte, it's a conjunctive two. And I say that because the preteritum looks the same. This could be the past, or it could be the conjunctive, but in 90% it's the conjunctive. It means I should. Sollte is the real should. Yeah, dürfen is derived from being allowed, but as you can see, we'd rather use it as should. And ich wollte we used before instead of ich wünschte, because wollen is the modal verb that I wanted to show you. Ich wollte, ich würde nicht rauchen. I wished I wouldn't smoke, or I wanted, literally. Wollen is the harsh form of möchten, of mögen. Yeah, you don't say ich will einen Kaffee, you say ich möchte einen Kaffee. Yeah. Lovepreet, you can, of course, re-listen to the webinar tomorrow. Lassen is tricky. It's a modal verb-like verb, but it's not an official modal verb. Yeah, but I love lassen. Lassen is beautiful. So, just quick insight in mögen. Mögen is the base of möchten. Keep that in mind. So there's three forms, just to show them to you because it's so beautiful. Ich mag, and you see quite different from möchte, which simply means I like. And the past of this is irregular. Ich mochte, but you see it's already pretty close to möchten. And you remember we used the past to build the Konjunktiv 2. I liked, very simple in English. And the Konjunktiv 2 simply adds an umlaut. Ich möchte. I would like. And that umlaut makes all the difference. Good. Thank you for being here. More or less, we stayed in time. I like that. And hope you join me again in another masterclass or in one of my Q&As in which you can ask any question that you like, whether you work with Smarter German or not. These are announced on Facebook, or if you're a paying customer in the community as well. Yeah. Tell others about it. Enjoy your German learning wherever you do it and however. And yeah, take good care of yourself. And have a lovely, lovely morning, afternoon, evening, night. Namaste.